Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome.
Well,
Come on in and have a seat.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. You're entering into the Positive Youth Development in Schools session. And we're going to get started. I see we have a few. Okay, so we have people. Everyone is in now. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Patricia Salahuddin, and I am your moderator for the Positive Youth Development in Schools this morning. Thank you for coming, or should I say this afternoon? Thank you for coming. We are going to get started. We have a wonderful speaker this afternoon for you. And she's with ISNA, works with us with ISNA. So I'll give you a bio in just a few minutes. First, I just want to read a dua for us to get started. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. O Allah, enrich me with knowledge, grace me with forbearance, honor me with taqwa, and adorn me with peace and security. Amen. May Allah guide us and protect us and grant us a successful afternoon. We've had a successful morning, and we are grateful to Him for that. And we grateful for you that you are here with us this morning or this afternoon. I'm going to start with the introducing our speaker, presenter, Ivana. And I'm going to let Ivana pronounce her last name for you. But I will give you the other information. Ivana earned her master's in youth development from Michigan State University and a BA in secondary education teaching foreign language from the University of Illinois at Chicago. As product manager at ISNA for youth development and advisor to MENA, she has brought 15 or more years of experience in working for the betterment of youth as a teacher, writer, and active mentor for youth leaders. And we are so happy to have Ivana this afternoon. And you may get started, Ivana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you for allowing me the space to be able to share something I'm so excited about. Youth development and just working with youth has been my passion ever since before I even started undergrad. In high school, just helping out my teachers and seeing what they do. It was just I grew up in a family of teachers and principals, so this has kind of been around me my whole life. My mother, my grandparents, everybody was kind of in education, so it almost felt a natural path for me to enter into. And so just having this platform to share that with everyone who's on here, I'm really honored and grateful for that. As you can see here, I'm going to be talking about positive youth development and how we can help our students thrive. And just for the sake of pronouncing my last name, I'm actually Eastern European, so the J is a Y. Once you make that switch, it's not that daunting and challenging, but my name is Ivana Zajkowska. And I wanted to talk to you today about, obviously, the concept of positive youth development, what it is, and how do we shift focus to be able to incorporate this in our schools and our classrooms. I'm going to be talking about some of the features of positive youth development, or PYD, as you can see. What is positive youth development in our classroom, what that might look like, and what is next. And at the end, we're going to have some time for questions, answers, or just conversation. That's why I have this here as Let's Talk, because I am definitely not the authority on this subject. It's just something I've studied, I'm passionate about, I incorporate it in my work, but I'd love to facilitate a conversation about that and see where we can take this. So who I am, I think with that short bio, inshallah, you also have an idea of what it is that I do. But outside of what I do, obviously, our identities are multifaceted. I'm an educator and lifelong learner. This is why I love being around youth, because they do not shy away from teaching you and pushing you out of your comfort zone to learn some new stuff that's out there. I'm a youth development professional, but outside of that, I'm also a mother of 2 daughters. I have a 4th grader and a 1st grader. I am a convert to Islam. I became Muslim at 18. So I bring kind of those dynamics to the picture and being able to understand identity, youth identity, creation, formation, negotiation, if you will. And I'm in the Midwest, which I'm sure is probably informing some of my life experiences and opinions. So all of that I try to bring to you, inshallah, be of benefit if I could in the next 45 minutes, inshallah. So what I would be calling for in a way is a revolution in the educational experience. So all revolutions start with a new vision of what is possible. So what I wanted you to do is maybe take 30 seconds and think about a child or a youth in your life that is important to you. Maybe son, daughter, a niece or nephew, a family friend. Just envision them. Just envision them and just kind of have them in the front of your mind. And now what I want you to think about is, what do you wish for them? And I don't know if you have chat privileges, but if you wanted to drop those in the chat as you think of them, what it is that you wish for that person, that young person you thought of. And then what skills do you want them to have as they grow? Again, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm not sure if you are able to. If you are. So when I did this exercise, and I do this exercise a lot because I train mentors, I train camp counselors and advisors, youth mentors, and overwhelmingly the responses I get are positive things, right? Most of the responses that we think of when we think of a young person that we love and care about is not things like they don't do drugs. I don't wish for them not to do drugs. I don't wish for them not to get pregnant, not to get in a gang. Typically, what people want for the children that they care about in their lives is more than them not having problems. We want them to have a full life with interests and activities, skills and talents, healthy relationships, connection to community, good career. So we want and we hope for them to be successful and thrive, and we have to focus on what that means. We want them to develop in positive attributes. So this revolution would begin by extending that and what we want for the kids we know to all the kids we come in touch with, all the children and youth. So viewing all children and all youth as our youth. And although there are various ways to think about what we want to promote in children, if we define a good kid by what they don't do, like they don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't talk back to mom and dad, right? That type of definition automatically, inevitably will inform our interaction with them and will inform how we structure the systems around them. It will attempt to control and manage youth development. So the field of positive youth development in this sense, coming in the 90s, was revolutionary in its own right because it shifted this paradigm in how we viewed youth and youth development. Positive youth development envisioned a world in which youth were supported and empowered to become caring, responsible, productive members of society. And that in itself might not be so groundbreaking until we start speaking about the how they envision going about achieving this goal. And there's this person called Dr. Benson. He's one of the leading researchers in this field of positive youth development. He wrote a book, All Kids Are Our Kids. And the primary goal of that book is to shift the language about kids that just focuses and preoccupies itself with problems and risks and deficit to a vocabulary that promote what we need to promote, the language of positive youth development. And we know that in Islam, obviously the way you think about things will inform how you act. So it starts with the intention, and then that manifests itself in our actions. So this has been a momentous movement in the understanding and the study of youth development with this effort of empowering all children and youth. So again, positive youth development, much like Islam, is concerned with the human potential. So it's an investment in children and youth in their potential, not where they are currently, but what do they need to have in order to achieve their potential, in order to thrive. So in that sense, on this slide, it says that positive youth development is intentional, pro-social approach that engages youth with their communities, their schools, organizations, peer groups, families, and so on, in a manner that's productive and constructive. It also recognizes and utilizes and enhances strengths, and it promotes positive outcomes for young people by providing opportunities, fostering positive relationships, and furnishing the support that they need to build on their leadership strengths. So essentially, positive youth development is calling for a shift of focus. If you think about, society has adopted this surgical mind frame when dealing with youth development, in the sense that we only a lot of times administer treatment when a patient is sick, right? This approach is costly to both our youth and our society because it results in too many of these emergency care situations, right? But we know that medicine has advanced and has shifted in how it thinks about promoting health and healthy lifestyle by focusing on eating, right? Focusing on prevention. So they're not waiting until you have a disease, you have a heart attack to treat you. They tell you how to avoid it in the first place, right? So this shift, as an example, would be if you have a young person who is hungry, let's say, right? And the risk deficit approach would say, oh, so we need to have stronger laws that prevent them from stealing, and we need to have better prisons, we need to because we're trying to avoid this risk behavior. But what positive youth development is calling for is saying, why not just show them where bread could be found? Why not teach them how to get that bread? So when you give a child bread that's hungry, you're giving them something positive, and you're still avoiding the risk behavior that you were trying to avoid by doing these laws, making it harder to steal, right? So just give them bread, give them the positive things that they need in life so that they're able to accomplish good things and stay away from any risk behavior. So instead of looking at problems and deficits of youth, what this author, Dr. Benson, suggests is that we change our lens and focus on the strengths in youth's lives from like a broader perspective. So an example of this would be, we should think about the percentage of news media stories that cast youth in favorable light. We should think about the percentage of parents who define parental involvement in school as concern for all kids versus just my kid. We should talk about percentage of kids who have access to high quality after school programs, percentage of neighbors who know their kid's name, right? So we're looking at, essentially, just to recap this focus is a transformation through positive experiences, supportive environments, and empowering relationships. This is what PYD is trying to do. And the goal, much like our own goals for the people that we were thinking about maybe at the beginning, the first exercise that I spoke about, is the 6 C's. There's competence, and the definition is on the screen. Positive views about and the ability to act effectively. Confidence, we want confident young people who develop. Connection, character, caring, and contribution. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, we can add perhaps even a 7th C, which could be curriculum, right? So what this calls for is thinking of youth development in a community sense. Community youth development that recognizes development doesn't happen in isolation. Essentially, youth development happens wherever youth are. And so therefore, PYD encourages to view that in a very holistic way and to think in systems. In other words, there's an African proverb that says, we often probably hear it, it says it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just the job of the parents, it's not just the job of the schools, it takes a whole system. And system as defined as a set of interdependent but independent parts which work together with a common goal of purpose. So what we would be focusing on, just because we're talking about the classroom more specifically, is this microsystem. We have family, religious setting, peers, classroom. And there's this concept called as Meso System. Basically, when the microsystems interact with each other, it's another layer. The leading, most influential human ecologist theorist is Bronfenbrenner. And so he kind of depicted it with this graphic, which I really like. So you have these microsystems here. They interact with each other in the Meso System, and then it grows larger and larger and larger. So the idea is, just to recap, that youth development does not happen in isolation. It does not need only one thing or one setting to work for them, but it kind of needs all of these environments to be able to be conducive to positive development. So with the attempt of shifting the focus of youth development from the negative to the positive, the concept of developmental assets, as you see here, the Search Institute has identified 40 positive supports and strengths that young people need to succeed and thrive. So this concept of developmental assets provided a broad vision by making a list of essential building blocks that are necessary for this type of development. So these assets are meant to strengthen the human infrastructure by claiming that the more asset a young person has, the more resilient he or she is to deficit behavior. So they're less likely to engage in risk behavior and more likely to actually have positive behavior. So in a metaphor, I really like the metaphor of the cup overflowing. So the more positive you put, like whatever, not even just positive, whatever you put into a cup, that's what's going to overflow. So if we're constantly adding positive things in these strengths and assets, then this is what is going to come out of that cup. So all assets are based on scientific literature, and you can probably read more about them on the Search Institute website. But what they're trying to point out is that there's importance of positive interaction between youth and their environment. And people who look at these, and we're going to go over them very briefly, people who look at these assets, and many of you will after you probably see them, you will probably reflect that they are common sense. Of course, it makes sense that these positive relationships, opportunities, and strengths are going to be good for kids. Many also see that the assets, the wisdom of their own culture, their tradition, right? So this recognition, which often taps in our deepest commitment and belief system, makes the heart knowledge of asset development. And then it gives passion to the head knowledge, which is proved by increasing research in the field. So the head and the heart, are almost aligned here with positive youth development and the 40 assets that are necessary. In Islam, we always talk about the head and the heart and how they interact in Salah, how they interact in many things. So here as well, we need to be able to obviously know what our heart is feeling is best, and then be able to kind of, back it up with research, I guess. So the number of assets is going to be associated with lowering risk behaviors, as I said, and they move youth along a successful life. At the same time, though, there was a study of 2,500 schools between the 90s and early 2000 that showed that youth are experiencing half or fewer of the total 40 assets. And the obvious limitation of a study like that, because it was conducted only with people who are currently attending schools, and probably minority students who are underrepresented. So this is not also considering the children who've already dropped out, right? So the number would be even lower still. But even with the people that we had, it showed that most youth have less than half of 40 assets. And this led to the conclusion, again, this is not just some kids who need more resources, but it's all kids who need more and would benefit from more. And so these developmental assets are kind of divided in external and in internal. External supports, opportunities, and relationships young people need across all aspects of their lives, things that come from their environments. And then internal, personal skills, commitments, values they need to make good choices. I'm not going to go into all of these just for the sake of time, but the 4 categories of external assets are support. So young people need to be surrounded by people who love, appreciate, and care and accept them. Family, that could be within family support, other relationships, other adult relationships, caring neighborhoods, school climate, so on and so forth. Empowerment, young people need to feel valued and valuable. So this happens when youth feel safe and respected. So this is probably reflected in community values of youth, youth being seen as resources, not just problems, services to others, and safety. So boundaries and expectations, young people need clear rules, consistent consequences for breaking rules, and encouragement to do their best. And last, constructive use of time. So they need opportunities inside and outside of school to learn and develop new skills and interests. So these are the external. Again, if you want to look more into these types of assets and what actual examples and what they mean, you can go to the Search Institute website. And then we also have the internal assets. This is commitment to learning. Young people need a sense of lasting importance of learning and belief that belief in their own abilities. This is achievement, motivation, things that probably as teachers you guys deal with, school engagement, homework, bonding to school, reading for pleasure, right? Outside of school assignments sometimes. Positive values, young people need to develop strong guiding values to principles and help them make healthy life choices. Social competencies, so they need the skill to interact effectively with others, and probably you've been part of conversations that analyze the effects of social media, perhaps on some of these social competencies. But they need to be able to make difficult decisions and to cope with new situations. And then the last one is positive identity, that they need to believe in their own self-worth and to feel that they have control over the things that are going to happen to them. So that's self-esteem, sense of purpose, positive view of personal future, things like that. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of these seem very intuitive or common sense, but unfortunately, they're not always the center of what we're trying to do when we interact with youth. So what does this look like in schools? The school developmental assets would be school engagement, bonding, achievement, motivation, caring school climate. Essentially, young people spend more time at school than any other place outside of home. So schools are more than just places where students get knowledge and skills to get a career or to go to college, right? There are places where these young people form their identity. They begin to see themselves as independent, emerging adults. So where do we start? We start with the students, young people themselves. So we place, essentially the call is to place youth development at the center of the school. Schools have long treated developmental outcomes as completely separate, distinct from, and even secondary to academic outcomes. And a lot of times we relegate these types of activities to outside of the classroom. So they're seen, in fact, as extra. And they're the first thing to go when a child misbehaves or they get a lower grade, right? So they lose recess, or if they've misbehaved, they're kicked off the team, the sports team, most of the time at a time when they need it most. So essential developmental tasks are addressed too often as add-ons, a workshop on bullying, a support group outside of course, right? And one thing that we have to realize that youth development, not just positive youth development, child development is not separate from the academic or enrichment that we provide in the classroom and should ideally guide decisions we make as a school and as educators for our classroom. Karen Pittman, actually, she's the member of International Youth Foundation. She said, problem-free is not fully prepared, and fully prepared is not fully engaged. Again, I'm going to repeat that. Problem-free is not fully prepared, and fully prepared is not fully engaged. On the other hand, great schools are transformative, can be. They take the practice of moving students along the achievement of benchmarks and turn it into a profound learning experience through which young people kind of build the path to a bright future. They recognize that a student's emotional and academic development are often interwoven. They come together. They don't happen separately. And research shows that there are 4 pillars of comprehensive school health. That's social and physical environment, teaching and learning, healthy school policy, and partnerships and services. And I'm not here, obviously, to teach you that, since I'm sure you already know this. And I will, in fact, focus on the teaching and learning aspect of it, which happens in the classroom, and what that might look like when it's informed by PYD. So PYD means placing student engagement at the core as a culture, not just as a one-off workshop or one-off assignment, right? So it places us at the core, and it informs the culture of our classroom, and it enhances comprehensive school health. It means tapping into young people's strengths and assets in order to support them, even with the academic success and deep personal enrichment. So not only research, but experience, which I'm sure you can testify, makes a strong case for youth engagement and youth-adult partnerships because of their potential and ability to change a young person's life for the better. And I will touch a little bit more later on youth-adult partnerships and what that might look like in a classroom. So again, research and experience also teach us something else as well, that young people will always pursue their own development. And they will do this regardless of the opportunities and what the environment presents. They will pursue relationships. They will pursue a sense of identity and belonging. They will pursue skill building and interest mastery. Now, the question is, what kind of opportunities do we place in their environment? Because they're going to pursue this regardless. So what this might look like in the classroom, great classrooms are an extension of great schools, or maybe the other way around. But they facilitate learning by making these developmental achievements central to their mission. And they're almost seamlessly integrated in your academic goals and your lesson plans. It's in a great classroom, the work of learning and the work of becoming one's self is bound together. A lot of times, at least when I was in undergrad and I was going through the education program, we are almost sold on this linearity of education, that it starts here, you go through a track, and if you do everything right, you'll end up being set for the rest of your life, because you'll end up on this path and you're going to go to college and you're going to get a good job. But life is not linear, it's organic. And schools deal with people, it deals with students, right? So their lives are not linear. It could be messy. And sometimes that makes us feel very uncomfortable. But we've kind of sold ourselves into this fast food method of education, model of education, where everything is standardized. But if you look at, Michelin restaurants, for example, everything is customized to local circumstances. So this is what PYD calls for in our education. So human talents and strengths and passions, they're all diverse. If you have 40 students, you probably have 40 different strengths and 40 different passions. And it's important for us to reflect where the idea of schooling came from and how we can adjust it to what we need it today, because schools were created for a different purpose when we had the Industrial Revolution, and what they needed to do was very different from what we need them to do today. So the way they needed to do it was different, again, from how we probably should do it today. So we can no longer be confounded by this linear, conformitist type of education. We're not dealing with robots, we're dealing with human beings, and we cannot even predict the outcomes of human development, but what we can do is create the conditions under which they will flourish. So these are the technically 5 things that I was going to focus on. And if you notice, they're not linear. They kind of work with each other. And sometimes I'll be speaking about the one and it sounds very much like the other, because they feed into each other. And the 5th one being consistency, that you do all of these four consistently, not as one-off. So the first one is caring relationships. Relationships are the context in which development occurs. And as educators, we have to be intentional with how we spend our time in our classroom and how we design our lessons. If we don't feel it, the students will probably surely not feel it as well, and they will feel what you're feeling. So positive relationships between adults and students are associated with positive student outcomes. They're probably going to manifest, they're likely to manifest in better school performance, more positive self-concept, better relationships with their peers, not even just their teachers, increased social contacts, greater sense of responsibilities, higher rates of college graduation. So it's all good stuff. And they're more likely to have lower levels of alcohol, drug use, later onset of sexual activity, lower levels of delinquency, and reduced level of depression. So a teen who does not have a healthy relationship with an adult lacks, outside of their even family. They could be getting that from their parents, but if they don't have at least one outside of their family, they're more likely to lack confidence. They're less likely to develop communication and social skills needed to establish strong personal boundaries, right? So there's, if they have no one for guidance to turn to when they're suffering and need to talk, they're not going to have a role model who kind of shows them how it is, like how you should walk through this problem and how you should deal with it. So again, here there's a head and a heart component and even a spirit component. So head is the cognitive component of the lessons that we're trying to build and the relationships we're trying to build. That this is the learning of new things. The heart is the active component, feeling excited about what they're learning. And then the spirit, connecting to young people and adults to make change, right? There's reason why many people opt out of energy and they don't, because they don't feed, not out of energy, out of education, because it doesn't feed their spirit. Because what they're good at might not always be the same thing as what they're passionate about, okay? So I do think it's important for me to mention that there's no single way, I'm sure you know this, no single way of engaging anyone, and certainly not youth. It's relationship-based. It goes back to this revolutionary way of looking at youth, not as just all in the same recipients of services, but as individuals with their own hopes and dreams and potential. And youth need adults who are trustworthy and follow up on their promises and commitments. They need to know that they're clearly interested in their growth. They need adults who are accessible on a constant basis, and they need adults who are supportive. So when we're talking about youth-adult partnership, what you might be thinking is, we should ask more youth to get involved. And then the back of your brain is saying, but I don't have time. And then you're probably thinking, okay, try to be easygoing, take positive risks, allow students to lead and make decisions. And then the back of your brain, but you know, what if something goes wrong? It's important for nothing to go wrong. And then you might be thinking youth-adult partnership is about collaborating as equals. And then the back of your brain says, but that makes me really uncomfortable because of the way that we have been sold the teacher-student relationship. So youth-adult partnerships is not simply having young people and adults in the same room together. What it looks like is that they're working, struggling, and celebrating together. This is based on mutual respect that for each person who's at the table, for everything that person brings to that table. So it's a delicate balance, and it could be a struggle sometimes until you kind of get in the groove of things, but often to save students from making mistakes or to push them forward academically, we become authoritative. Unfortunately, this leads to disengagement and students losing interest. On the other hand, when we want to appease the student too much and give in to all the requests, we fail to give constructive feedback or to challenge students to grow. So when we work as partners, the goal isn't to make the material easy for them or to make the choice for them, but to make the material accessible to them. So that's very different. And so achieving this kind of proper balance of guidance and youth agency is ultimately dependent on trust. They're not going to engage in this with you if they don't have trust. So, and when trust is established, though, students will see teachers as someone who cares and has their best interests at heart. And this allows you as the teacher opportunity to encourage agency. It's a circle. The good news, the strengths and meaning of the relationship with which the investment that you make in these relationships contributes towards motivation, intrinsic motivation, and better learning environment. So the small things you do at the beginning of the year, let's say, to build these types of relationship are long-term investment in that child, and even towards eliminating behavior issues down the line. And I've seen this happen. My children go to a Waldorf school, and so they do a lot of PYD elements in their schooling. And when I see when teachers invest in the small things to build the relationship, behavior issues are never what I've seen them in other classrooms where maybe the teacher focused solely on academics. So students disengage as an unsuccessful coping strategy, but often it's misinterpreted as disinterest or even low ability, which could be more harmful. So how we view a student like that will inform what we do about it and how we approach the situation. So that leads into high expectations. We are in a unique position in classrooms to shape and in many cases reshape attitudes about a student's academic ability. Research shows that even small shifts in attention to student mindsets have been huge in the impact of school performance. Their ability to work hard, focus in class, meet academic challenges are all informed by students' perceptions of their environment, the relationship with the adults around them. And in other words, it can be learned and it can be changed. So if a student understands that they can succeed through their efforts, they're more likely to work hard. And high expectation messagings are defined as consistent communication of direct and indirect messages that this child you're working with can succeed. And this is at the core of caring relationships, which we talked about, and communicate belief in the young person's innate resilience and ability to learn. The message is, you can make it. You have everything it takes to achieve your dreams, and I'll be there to support you. And if there's something that you need, I will be able to place that asset in your life to be able to succeed. A high expectation approach is individually based and strength focused. So you're essentially identifying your students' unique strengths, gifts, and nurturing those, and then using them to work on needs and concerns that they might have. And this balance, sometimes we also have to balance high expectations with the feeling of attainment, getting them on their way and helping them get there. And this is not, again, to make things easy, is to make it accessible to them, because when you just make it easy, you're doing a disservice to your students. I think we all know this, but to make the material attainable to them and their specific learning style and needs is a completely different approach. This is specifically important when they haven't met the high expectations we have voiced. So to avoid disappointment or disengagement, this is where, as the teacher, we can engage the student. We can say, let's talk about how we can do this and empower them to do their best. I was dealing with a youth just a few weeks ago. They hadn't been showing up to meetings. And if I had interpreted that as a poor effort, it would look different than if I had interpreted as just low ability to show up, right? So we talked about it. I got on a meeting with this person and, explained everything. And it turned out it was just poor time management. And we talked it through. And then we also discussed how can we put things in place where it's not just for this week or next week, but it's something that they can upkeep for a long time to come. So if a student that understands that their mistake and even failure is a consequence of poor effort, they're more likely to work hard the next time, right? A disengaged student who is met with a teacher who just views mistakes as a learning opportunities is more likely to be motivated and course correct before it becomes an issue. But if they see this as a result of limited ability, they're just more likely to give up. I can't do this. I'm just not capable of doing this, and I'm not even going to try. This means that a central attribute of an effective classroom environment is the constant emphasis of the belief that their effort towards high standard will bear positive results. And also the other quick thing I will say about mistakes as learning opportunities is what I learned through reading a lot about Sir Ken Robinson. He's an educator, author. I think he just passed away last year, but he kind of has that he was a thought leader in this field. And he said, you will never come up with anything original if you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time young people get to be adults, most kids have lost their capacity to do that, to be creative, because they have become frightened of being wrong. And our national education system is kind of built upon viewing mistakes as the worst thing you can make. And so the result is we are educating people out of their creative capacities, and they often don't know how to have an original thought as a result because we stigmatize mistakes. The next thing was voice, choice, and contribution. Agency. Young people develop through active participation in their own development and learning. The opportunity to shape decisions that have impact on their lives is fundamental, and it cannot be replaced. And it maintains a sense of agency in their learning. So when young people have this type of agency, they orient themselves to learning that resonates to their interests, their needs, their passions, right? And they pursue this knowledge and skills as things that deeply matter to them. And research indicates that critical student voice is, that student voice is critical in promoting this agency, and how profoundly individual choice and decision making are linked to academic performance. When we create a classroom and course materials that engage students' needs and desires for agency and voice, the students are more likely to expand their creative energy, and they're more likely to be engaged in their learning. If the environment in the classroom stifles this urge and interest, then they were likely to make choices to engage somewhere else. If not, sometimes not at all. So we cannot underestimate the power of acting out in classrooms. If it's the only way out or the only way to get attention, then that's the way they're going to get it, by acting out. So our job would be to give them a chance not to have to. The message we should be giving our students through words and action is, out there, they don't listen to you, maybe. In here, I will change that. So input on the learning that we're doing. And given this kind of agency, the ability to affect change in yourself, in the world around you, is a strong predictor of academic success. So this idea of student engagement, students cannot and should not be seen as mere recipients of services. Most effective and sustainable change happens from inside out. Actually, a Greek philosopher had once said, youth are not vessels to be filled. They're not coming to schools just to be given, all this information, just stuff it in there, but they're fires to be lit. So they're not vessels to be filled, but fires to be lit. And that highlights the idea in human development that best development happens from inside out, not from outside in. So effective youth engagement leads to positive outcomes at 3 levels: the individual level, personal skills, healthy choices, sense of identity; at the social level, stronger positive connections with friends and adults, larger support network; and at the system level, where you have greater civic engagement, policies and programs that are responsive to the needs of young people. And when engaged like this, students are more likely to feel connected to their schools, classrooms, community, and build stronger relationships with friends, peers, and adults in those spaces. And they're more likely to make decisions that exhibit healthy behaviors. We sometimes make room, this is just a caution, for 1 or 2 students at the table and expect them to speak on behalf of all students. That most likely is not going to be effective. When youth voice, choice, and contribution are brought into the classroom, they contribute to such a meaningful inclusion, efficacy, and mattering. And this contributes towards engaging experience, right? Adolescence, as I mentioned, is a period of rigorous identity formation and negotiation. Knowing this, we have to design our classroom experience and encourage our students to pursue interests and passions. We have to encourage them to question the world around them and to challenge the status quo. And this is not easy, especially if, like myself, when earning our education degrees, we were not taught necessarily how to disrupt the system, but how to teach within it. So it could take some learning on our side. But what we could do is maybe include differential instruction in our lesson. Our students have a need to find out what they're good at, what is important to them, what motivates them, and yes, even what their own limitations are. So while there are certain core content that we need all students to get, and as teachers, we know what the skills and competencies maybe are that we need them to build, there are always many ways to go about achieving that goal. So giving them different choices to accomplish the same thing will encourage creating engaging experience. Experience is the most sure way to gain knowledge and mastery. Papua New Guinea has a saying where it says, knowledge is a rumor until it lives in the muscle. Meaning there's another saying, involve me and I learn, right? Don't just show me, involve me. So when you engage them early, young people get excited, because you don't want to create lessons on your own assumptions of what their interests might be. So while schooling might be a process of amassing information, education, unlike schooling by definition, is just so much more than that. This means we have to move our students from being passive observers in our classroom to active participants, and not just in activities, but their own education and development. So teachers, we need to invest time in knowing our students well, and to be able to design learning experience that engage them and build upon the assets that they need. And then finally is consistency. This is the backbone. If you do high expectations once, if you build a relationship once, none of that is going to offer long-term fruit. All these 4 things that I talked about, they all weave into each other, and they have to be consistently present so that young people know what to expect from their environment and what their environment expects from them. So consistency is what makes this holistic approach that we spoke about holistic in a way. It's more than one-off approach, or in turn, consistency is seen as an indication of commitment. Young people, if they see that you're consistently supportive, you're consistently giving them high expectations, they see that as your commitment to them, and they're more likely to then rise up to the challenge and perform at a higher level. And this might look like intentional planning for a lot of the teachers in the classroom. How we have to think about how are we planning at the onset of the school year, but thinking of how am I going to feel like in spring. So it's almost this like backward planning in connecting the dots to the final goal. This is difficult for youth because they're in such an inconsistent time. Their interests are inconsistent, their bodies are inconsistent, what they're enjoying or what they are struggling with is inconsistent. But again, I would push you all to think about that this is not unique. Yes, okay, the body component maybe is unique to youth, but the world is inconsistent. That's not unique to young people. And by extension, beyond adolescence, the whole world is unpredictable. We don't know what the world is. We didn't know we were going to be here 3 years ago, the way we're learning, what's going on in the world. So we don't know what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time, let alone when the students that are in our classroom graduate college and they're adults. And yet, as teachers, we're educating them for a world we really don't know what it's going to look like. So our consistent commitment to them is what matters most. And again, like I said at the beginning, we're not necessarily giving them one set of experience, but we're kind of setting the you can have the best of seeds, the most high quality seeds, but if you're going to try to place it in like clay, not going to succeed. So our job is to kind of till that earth so that, you know, when the seed is planted, they're able to sprout. So it's for us to create that environment and those relationships for the young person. No matter what the world is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years, they're prepared for it. And that goes beyond any one academic achievement goal that we might have in our classroom. So the basic takeaways is be realistic. Just because you cannot do an ideal of what was presented maybe today, you can still do bits of it. You start small and you'll see success. Working towards incorporating some of these PYD principles that we talked about, but it's not easy. This is slow and important work. Keep in mind that it's impossible to teach everything. And when you think about a teacher, you all probably have a memory of a teacher you connected with in your school. It might have been, you know, high school, middle school, college. You might not remember the content in their class, but you did well in their class, very likely. And because that was, you felt that this teacher cared about you and they held you accountable. So it's, while saying that, I will also say it's nearly impossible to be that for every student all the time. So you put it out there, you find which students gravitate towards it. Something you can do every day, every class, you can offer. You can, you know, at the beginning of class, say hello when they're walking in, right? You can greet students every day. These are some of the tangible takeaways that I want you to, you know, when you leave here and you have your next class on Monday or Tuesday, you know, some things that you can try to see how they change the environment in your class, right? Greet your students every day. Breakout rooms, if you're still online, in a workshop, 3 to 5 minutes, right? They can talk. Some of that can be addressed in those types of environment, and let the sharing happen. And then the last thing that I thought of, and I'm sure you will think of many more, being in the environments you're in and being to your own unique situations, you can talk with teachers you work with closely and see if you all together can come up with some idea, because colleagues can offer support. You know, you probably are aware of this. And the more you have of people who are trying to do this, the more effective it can be. And just the last reminder, obviously I did give some examples, but I would like to highlight that this is a pedagogy more than a curriculum. It's the how, not necessarily the what of education. The what will look different based on your environment, based on the students you're with, based on the school you're in and how much freedom you might have with curriculum development. So hopefully what I shared was broad enough principles that you can try to implement even a little bit of it next time you're in the classroom. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sister Ivana. So now, thank you for that wonderful presentation. This has been an excellent day. So now we are going to allow our participants to ask questions. You may unmute yourself, open your mic and ask, or you can put it in the chat, either way. Okay. Let's see, do we have any questions in the chat yet? No. Well, I'm going to read something that one of the participants said. It was Cassandra. She said, when the children make mistakes, I let them know we learn from that it didn't work, or let them know that it didn't work that way, and let's find another way to do this problem. We learn from our mistakes. It is okay to make it because we are still learning.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are there any questions? Any other questions for Sister Ivana?
Is there a way that we can email her, or should have an email that we can help ask any more questions that have become, because I'm interested in this youth program, but I don't know where to go for. I usually work with younger children, and I do a lot of positive things in my classroom, but I would like to even have more resources.
Yeah, I've left my email. I don't know if you can see my screen still, but I've left my email and phone number in there.
Yeah, it's still up. We can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you see that, Sister Cassandra? Her email is up.
Oh, I see it. Now I see it.
Okay, great. Okay, great. I like the idea of the positive youth development is not I mean, I'm happy that you brought that point, that it's not a curriculum, but it's something that we can do within our curriculum. Whatever it is we're teaching is something that we can do. It's such it's such an important point to make, because people say, "Oh, I can't do it." They sound, no, you can do it with whatever you're teaching, whatever topic that you're teaching. You can do the PYD. Thank you for bringing that point.
And I also like that you keep saying that we have to keep intertwining it with, with the positive things that we're doing. Also, I like to know your idea. Sometimes they have the program, I think it's PB. It's a program where they emphasize positive things, like giving them green tickets and everything else. I want to go beyond that. What else can I do to put that in my classroom, that they know that we are there for them?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the green tickets, but as I said, I think that's going to look very different in the classroom you're in, depending on who your students are and what are their needs. But as long as you're showing them that you care, that you're accessible, and then you're constantly giving them this high messages, high expectation messages, then they're able to pick up on that, and they're able to perform better. Because they know that you believe in them. And if they fail, that you're giving them a different avenue to try it out again, that this is not the end of the world. So however you would show them care, attention, connection, it would, I can't necessarily give a one kind of answer of this is what it would look like, or this is what you should do, if that makes sense. But I definitely see, in the classrooms that I've been in, what that might have looked like is just making myself accessible after class for some of my students that needed extra time, taking interest in their lives, checking up on them if they shared something with you that, hey, my grandparents were visiting, how did their visit go? Showing them caring messages like that, that you are paying attention to what they're sharing, or if they struggled with something, following up on that.
Well, one other question from Sister Khan: how can we leverage our understanding of the importance of positive relationships in the classroom to develop trauma-informed pedagogy for the benefit of all learners?
Can you give me maybe an example? Because I don't see these as mutually exclusive. I feel like what you are already bringing as positive relationship works for everybody. Some people might need more. They might need different types of assets. So even within positive relationship, the types of assets that they need might be a little bit different, but the more of them that they have, the more likely that they will have positive outcomes. So I'm not saying let's ignore any risk in their environment or any risk attitudes that they might have done. I'm just saying let's try to fill their lives with the positives that they need to be able to deal with that.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. This is Sister Khan. Yeah, so really what I was thinking about was, mashallah, you gave such a wonderful talk. It was really excellent. And it's relating to a lot of the things that I've been reading about trauma-informed education, which is why I brought it up. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts, especially after this year, I feel like it's something that's so much more broadly applicable than ever to, every population of students. And I think, you know, the examples you were talking about were really valuable about how to build this positive environment. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on kind of leveraging that. And I don't even want to say taking it to the next step, you know, because you're right, it's all the same situation, it's all the same step. But, you know, I thought I was wondering if you had any thoughts on, I guess, extending it to maybe our learners who have more needs, which we're going to see more and more of as, you know, this year wraps up.
Yeah, if you remember, I started off by saying that it's not some kids, it's all kids, it's all students who
Right,
can
absolutely.
from more. And the goal isn't to ignore what they're going through. It's to give it the proper space for them to discuss it, involve them in those discussions. How did this experience this year affect you? How did it manifest in your learning? So you're giving them the opportunity to explore what it is that they're thinking, because some of them might not even have processed it yet. We're still going through some of it. And we live in an environment where it's constantly the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. We don't barely stop to think about how what's happening now is affecting me. So creating maybe those spaces in the classroom where they can talk about that, showing them that you are accessible to help them navigate some of the difficulties that they might experience, maybe.
Right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We had another question. It's almost about to disappear off my screen, but I jotted down the content of it. One of our teachers says she struggles with consistency. So she wanted to know if you have any suggestions for becoming more consistent.
Yeah, I am inspired by the Prophet's hadith, where it says it could be a small thing as long as it's consistent. A lot of times, many of us go in education because of the people that we are and what we're trying to accomplish. We want to do it all. We want to do it perfect, right? So often I think part of why we're not consistent is because we're overwhelmed and we're trying to do too much. So if it is that you just try, I pick this example because it seems so simple, but it does such a big, big difference in your relationship with your students as well as the classroom environment, is just saying Salam alaikum when they walk into your classroom, shaking their hand, whatever environment you're in, right? And just showing, like looking at my daughter's school, the teacher shakes their hand, says hello or good morning, whatever. And then they look in the eye. And if the student isn't looking, they will say, they will encourage them to look in the eye. That's it. They do this constantly, every single day. And the day a child doesn't want to meet your eyes, the day the child doesn't want to respond your salams, you can pick up right away that there's maybe something going on. It kind of, your spidey teacher senses will probably tingle. So pick something small that you know is achievable for you and stick with it for a period of time until it becomes natural. And then you pick another thing. It doesn't have to be all of it. I hope that was helpful.
Yes. I hope so. It was helpful to me. I benefited from it. Are there any other questions? There were some comments in the chat, but there are comments in the chat. 1, 2, 2. So, see, I got something. I was trying to get something up on the screen. Hang on just a second.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, brother. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair for a wonderful lecture and sharing your experiences. I have a question and a small comment.
Sure.
I would like to start with the comment. One thing that has helped me a lot, especially with my kids, is the fact that we learned that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "I'malu fa kullun muyassarun lima khuliqa lahu," and that is, go ahead and work and do good deeds, because Allah will make it easy for everyone that is, or that thing that they were created for. And some of this hadith comes from a philosopher and a well-known educator from Brazil, Pablo Freire, who said that a human being should be the subject of their education, not the object of it. which rhymes to what you said, that we cannot assume that our kids or students are just recipients. They are reservoirs or containers that we are going to dump knowledge into them. They have to create their own knowledge. And this has helped me a lot in the concept of creativity, in the sense that when I go into my classroom or I deal with my kids, I am always teaching them things so we can use that knowledge to create new things. And that is the essence of creativity.
Yes.
So I go not as a teacher, I go as a learner as well. And I make sure that they understand that we come here to learn together. We are equals, because as much as I teach you, you are going to teach me. And that has inspired me to do great stuff with my students and my kids. But the basic idea here is that, you know, learn whatever you can, and as much as you can. I'm going to help you and you're going to help me. And with this knowledge, that's why I don't like the multiple choice and the matching and all that stuff. Although it's necessary at one stage, we need that information to create, but the focus is on creation and creativity.
Yeah.
So this is just a humble comment to echo what you talked about. And the question is, yesterday we had a beautiful session about Islamic pedagogy, which I've been talking about also in many forums and many places I go. I believe that the view, the philosophy, and the view to the human being will shape everything else that we do. So the fact that Islam gives us a unique view of the human being will shape our understanding of the role of that human being in life, and what they do and what they should do and what they should not do, etc. So in light of that, I was wondering if you are going to take this, or maybe you are doing already, as part of Islamic pedagogy, which means to start from the Islamic perspective to shape out, you know, this beautiful work that you're already doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. On your first comment, information does not inspire change. We have, you know, I have in my hand a device that can spit any information in less than 3 seconds. And that doesn't mean that I've acquired knowledge or I've acquired wisdom. Is what do I do with that information? How do I group it to actually gain understanding? That's what we want education to be, not just amassing information and just stuffing. As I said, they're not vessels to be stuffed. You know, we have to inspire it from within. And I completely agree. I have been working on something because I do see the parallels. PYD is the active promotion of human potential. Islam is concerned with human potential, the intrinsic value of the human being. So there is definitely a connection there. And I can, even just thinking off the top of my head, I can see PYD in Sirah, in the early communities. I see it manifested in the just the behavior of the community, the interaction that the Prophet had with his companions, with the children around, with the community. I definitely see the parallels. I've been working on something like that. Inshallah, soon we can maybe present that too.
I so like we have run out of time. In fact, we're over time, and we're taking up somebody's lunchtime. But that's not the only reason I let us continue, because I know there's not another session right now. But this is wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you, Ivana. This is a wonderful, great information, especially for our classroom teachers and any of us that deal with children. And I'm not in the classroom right now, but I do have grandchildren, and I really could benefit from that information that you shared with me, with us. Inshallah, we are out of time. Inshallah, everybody will be coming back after lunch, after the break, or salat, and we will get started on our next session, which starts at what time is it? 1:45. It's started to, wait a minute, let me give you the wrong time. It's going to start at 2:45. So our next session will start at 2:45. All of the parallel sessions will start at that time. We right now have a break, and I did put in the chat box a link for the evaluation. So if you would take note of that. Do you have any closing words you'd like to say, Ivana?
No, I just want to thank you, Sister Patricia. I've read your bio. Mashallah, I'm humbled to be on the same platform as you. It was a little, I had to take a moment to recognize the privilege I was being given to be able to speak here and for you to moderate this session. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to look for that person because
No, I totally just Googled you. It wasn't anyone who sent me that.
All right, thank you, Ivana. You are so kind and sweet. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. This has been a wonderful session. This has been a wonderful day. Alhamdulillah. We give praise and thanks to Allah for all that He has done for us, and that we're bringing us together in this time of the pandemic, and in this time of trial. We've gotten some great benefits from here, from this time, and from all of you coming together. Thank you for your participation, and have a nice break, and we'll see you back at 2:45. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well,